In this week's episode of SempreInter, we'll be discussing the draw against Napoli and the subsequent exit from the Coppa Italia. We'll be previewing the Sampdoria game in the Serie A this weekend. Special guest James Horncastle, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è la torre per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! E gol! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il tiro! Samir! Bandanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Ruzzari, wishing you to a quarantine version of Studio Inter. The one we haven't done. We haven't done enough pod for about 3 months because of all the madness that has been going on in the world, which everyone in the world is fully aware of. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the football, because there actually was some football played this weekend. It started and it's going to continue, and it's going to continue throughout the summer every 3 days. So you know, strap on and let's go. And here and I'm joined by as always by a wonderful panel, starting with the SempreInter preview writer, Mr. Mohammed Nasser.
You know, I caught you there almost saying beautiful about the panel. You were going to be right about that as well, you know.
That's true.
But guys, I can't understate or underline my excitement to being back at this. This is amazing. Even though we're using archaic Skype as a platform, everyone knows the cool kids are on Zoom now, you know. So, but no. Okay. Nonetheless, I'm very excited.
Well, have you switched jobs to Zoom from your own job and doing like a commercial for them now? No, Zoom is better. I guess so. But I don't do audio. We don't do video. We just do audio. So I figure, you know, if that works, I'll have a look at it. I'll talk to producer Renato and see what he says. I listen to
probably just as well. All of our lockdown haircuts. I think it's probably a good idea.
And that is the London media personality, Mr. Will Beckman, introducing himself and his hair.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the other side, ish. I hope everyone's stayed safe. I hope everyone's kept a smile on their faces. And most of all, I hope you've had a good rest, because it's not even been 72 hours since football returned, and I'm already at the end of my tether. So looking forward to another pod.
It's good that that Mo is here, because I'm with you right all the way there, Will.
God!
I was tweeting. I was hoping the season, when will it end? That's how I felt.
I woke up feeling like Malizani this morning on the front pages. Cos'è diventato il calcio? Giunga cazzo! Honestly.
And also in the background we have a very good friend of the show who, since this unfortunate break, has changed jobs and been pumping out content like no tomorrow, quality content as well for The Athletic. Welcome back, Mr. James Horncastle.
Pleasure to be here. I must say, when you said we've got football coming this weekend, I was like, have we really? It feels like such a strange concept to have games of football going on. That means something to us, I would say, given that the Bundesliga has been back for 3 weeks now. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, and we're also joined by our very good friend from Canada, all the way, the TSN producer over at TSN, Mr. Michael Gallo. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back with you guys. It feels like we're starting a new season right now, but we're in the previous season still.
Yeah.
Very rare to have club soccer in June, but excited to be back and excited to be back talking with you guys.
Well, let's get to it then, James. I mean, you know, you started working for The Athletic and you started pumping out content, and this during one of those. One of the things you put out that really hit home for me, for obvious reasons, is, you know, it was a 10-year anniversary of the treble, and your interview with José Mourinho, which, I mean, of all the interviews I devour of him when he talks about the treble, this one really stood out for me because it felt like he really opened up to you and what he said. I mean, what can you tell us about that interview? How did you feel doing it? How did it come to you?
Well, it was quite surreal, actually, because he was just walking around Tottenham's training ground with his hand in his pocket and his phone to his ear. And I think he'd spoken to Gazzetta maybe a few weeks or maybe even months before. I know that their interview, which kind of came out the same day, was in the pipeline for a lot longer than the one that I did. But I think what resonated to me about that interview was just how much that team still means to him. Everything that we kind of hear about Mourinho these days, about how he has this abrasive personality and falls out with dressing rooms and finds it very difficult to kind of strike up a rapport with, various players. That's clearly not true of that Inter side. And in some respects, I think it makes him all the more fond of the memories that they made together and the relationship that they still have, which I think a lot was made over the weeks leading up to that anniversary, that they're all on a WhatsApp group together. They still speak, and whenever there's someone's birthday or wedding anniversary or the anniversary of a game that they played in, or someone scoring a goal, they all remember it. And from all reports, Jose is one of the most active people on that WhatsApp group, which again, isn't something you tend to really associate. I mean, when you speak with a lot of footballers, some of them, they're careful not to make too many relationships within the game itself, because they know that they can be sold at any time, that it's a short career, and that those friendships might not last. And so when you hear him talking about how he's still so in touch with that group of players and that they're still so close, it is pretty special, really.
It is. I mean, I have a follow-up question on that theme about what you said about it's so unique to see Mourinho have such a great relationship with them, given that mostly he's been known for not getting along with dressing rooms. I personally have a theory about this, and that is that it's a generational shift. That it seems to me that players born after 1989, for some reason, he can't connect with them, and but older than that, he can build relationship. It's like they have social tangents that they can build upon. Do you think there's maybe something to that?
Well, I also think with that Inter team, I can imagine, having followed Roberto Mancini for a while now, that team will be no stranger to having a manager come in at halftime and absolutely cuss them out for making a mistake or not doing whatever they wanted. And I think maybe in that respect they were better prepared for what Mourinho was going to be like. I think also that Inter group had very strong characters in it who would stand up for themselves and gave as good as they got. And I think Mourinho respected that. They respected that about him. I mean, a lot of the kind of stories they share now are kind of, about him coming into the dressing room, haranguing Julio Cesar, and then sort of kicking over an ice bucket and falling over at the same time. And I think Zanetti tells a story about Cordoba, who wasn't in the team all that much that season. He sort of made a few cameo appearances, and Mourinho kind of justifying it to his face by saying, "Come on, Ivan, you're 33 now," and Ivan would go, "No, I'm 34." I think those sort of characters, I think, were more amenable and more receptive of Mourinho's ideas than perhaps today's generation is. But I don't discount him from being successful in this, in the modern era still. I know a lot of people feel the game has moved on, that you can't set up for games and win in the same way that his Porto and Chelsea sides did, particularly in Europe. But he's still won a trophy, I think, in every job he's had, even at Manchester United, which was seen to go badly wrong. So I suppose it's what do we expect of Mourinho now? I think in that first 6 years of him being very much the kind of leading man in European football between 2004 and 2010, it felt there was nothing that this man couldn't achieve. We judged him on kind of unprecedented standards that he was setting, for example, winning the treble. And now whenever he he falls short of a league title or going far in the Champions League, we tend to think he's a diminished coach, when in actual fact, by modern standards, he still keeps things ticking along quite nicely. I just feel that I think it's really interesting when you look at when he goes from one job to another, say Porto to Inter to Chelsea, 3 different countries, 3 different languages. And yet, in retrospect, you find he uses the same tropes, and where they all felt quite new at the time, like him saying "Zero titoli," which he'd done at Chelsea, and he did it. He did it Inter, sort of intentionally getting the name of someone he wanted to slight wrong. So I remember was it Beretta, the Siena coach, he called Barnetta. And there was Tito Villanova, who he called Pito Villanova.
Lo Monaco, that's the best one ever. Monaco di Tibete, Bayern Monaco. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I think we're all kind of wiser to these kind of tricks that he used to think he used to play, and we will all be wowed by them. I think that there maybe has been, well, there certainly has been Mourinho fatigue on the part of the English media, and I think if you look at Italy, even though it kind of, his relationship with the local media soured towards the end of that season. Remember him sort of pushing Andrea Ramazzotti. Is it Andrea Ramazzotti? Yeah, it is. The Corriere dello Sport journalist. And they're essentially having a boycott of his press conferences, and then they're kind of, we're not going to hold press conferences anyway. We're going to have a press silence and boycott it all. I still feel that there are certain countries that have been maybe exposed to a high concentrate of Mourinho over a short spell of time, who still revere him and don't have maybe the same fatigue that we do here in England anymore. I get the impression he would be welcomed back with open arms in Italy, were he to ever go back.
Well, I mean, he's never said anything about returning to Inter. I mean, did you get anything? Did he say anything? Did he give any kind of clue as to, before taking the Tottenham job, that Inter had been in touch with him, before appointing Conte, and that he would be open to returning? Was it anything like that?
No, I didn't get any impression of that, but I don't think we ever really approached that subject. However, I think because it's a new management team at the top at Inter, new ownership, certainly new people who are sort of advising the president on who should be taking Inter forward for the next 3 to 5 years. I think that there was a reluctance. There's an awareness that things have changed in European football, and that Mourinho isn't yesterday's man, but perhaps it wouldn't be going back to move forward. I don't think. I also think there's a very conscious kind of effort on Inter's part, yes, to be successful. I think that comes first and foremost, but B, to kind of be in step with the times. And I think, I'm sure we're going to get into this about Antonio Conte, but I think they made the right decision when it came to appointing him, and I think he was their number one target, and unjustifiably so. I don't think there was any other coach in Marotta's mind when it became apparent that they were going to be moving on from Spalletti at the end of last season.
I'm going to hand you over to Mo. Did you have a question for James?
Yeah, James, I mean, another very well discussed topic about Mourinho and the treble, and I'm sure any Interista, especially one in our age bracket, could go on and on for ages about it. But another topic that that's quite hot at the moment is, of course, Lautaro's future at Inter or outside of it. If you were his manager, what would you advise him? Like seeing the player's qualities and where he fits on the pitch, what system he plays in best, etc., etc. What advice would you give Lautaro?
If I were his agent or coach, is that what you?
Agent,
what do you mean by manager?
Agent.
Agent.
Yeah, I meant agent. Yeah, sorry.
I'm an agent. I want to get paid. So it depends where my priorities lie, really. Whether I'm thinking what's best for my client or what's best for me.
Well, I mean, let's play the argument that you're an agent who recognizes that future a growth of the capital gains on an existing asset could mean a bigger payday in the future. So you want to develop the asset to its maximum potential. That's your objective. Eventually, the payday will come.
I think you go to Barcelona just because they are, with Real Madrid, the biggest club in the world. You are going to attract more endorsements there, at least at this moment in time, than you will at Inter. It saddens me to say that because I'm a big fan of Serie A and its big clubs, but that is the economic reality of the last, certainly the last decade. I would say. I mean, it's even something that I think Juventus were kind of tacitly aware of when they first signed Paul Pogba. I remember Andrea Agnelli saying that it was a stepping stone club it wasn't a destination for Pogba. The best they could hope for would to be a transitory stage in his career to going to a club that has the money and the platform to kind of satisfy him or where he wants to be. Now, with Pogba, that hasn't worked out. I think with Lautaro, if I'm Antonio Conte, I'm tearing my hair out and needing another hair transplant with this, because I think Lautaro is a fantastic player. I think I've spoken about him on this podcast before. I think he's a really intelligent player. How he can link up with more or less anyone he plays with. He can play on his own up front. He can play with a partner, and we've seen, particularly in the Champions League this season, he was the player who delivered in the big games so much more than Lukaku. I know Lukaku scored in both for the Milan derbies, but and he scored away in Naples in the league. But for the most part, the goals that have mattered have tended to come from Lautaro. I think for Lautaro, he's in a win-win situation, right? Because I know Inter at this moment in time have no intention of extending his contract because he's got another couple of years to run. But he is going to be at a club that will be in the Champions League again for a third season in a row. The club keeps getting richer and richer because of being on that Champions League platform. It can attract better commercial partners, which means he's going to increase his earning potential and become one of the highest paid players at the club, along with Lukaku. The issue, as we saw with Juventus, as I mentioned, when they signed Pogba, was I think at the time their wage ceiling was something like between 5 or 6.5 million euro. Barcelona and Real Madrid, that's what they pay Junior Firpo, something like that. I mean, it's I think it depends really what Lautaro wants. I can see how tempting it is to go to Barcelona, play with Messi on a regular basis. I think Lautaro fits the profile better than any other player in world football at the moment to be Luis Suarez's replacement. I think there are great similarities in how they play. But as a kind of Serie A fan, I would obviously like him to remain at Inter rather than watch another kind of 9 months of an Alexis Sanchez restoration project.
Okay, right. I'll hand you over to Will. Did you have a question for James?
Yes. Returning to what we saw on Saturday evening, I mentioned earlier that the doom and gloom has returned extremely quickly over Inter's heads after 3 months of no football. It's as if everyone's picked up with the opinions they dropped at the start of March, despite the fact that I thought on Saturday, oh no, but why are you laughing? This is. I was listening to the radio.
I'm laughing.
I could not believe my ears.
I'm laughing
the Inter
because
fans calling in. Like, did you miss football, or did you just miss being a pain in the arse? Like, watch the football before you talk. The world is barely turning again, and we've been flung head first into an inquest about a match that we pretty much dominated. I mean, am I the mad one here? I couldn't
No,
believe. And then you see all the newspaper headlines as well.
Are you telling me that because I you see I agree with that.
That wasn't actually a question. I'll ask one in a second.
No, it wasn't. No. I agree. I agree with the newspapers. I thought it pissed me. I haven't been this angry after an Inter game for a very, very long time. I mean, I was fuming. I was absolutely seething with rage after the first half. Right. Sorry. Ask the question. We can argue.
Okay. Yeah, we'll argue afterwards. But anyway, so. Moving on, what did you make of the performance was where I think I was going before that went off in another direction. Is it fair to be critical? And, is it fair that there are some Inter fans who are suggesting that Conte has not improved at all in the last 9 months and that, he's not all he's cracked up to be, etc. and so on, because there appears to be a surprising number of people who subscribe to that school of thought.
Yeah, it is surprising to me. It's maybe not a shock because of the hyperbole and hot take era that we kind of live in. I suppose you can look at it this way, if we're going to play devil's advocate and side with these critics, is that it's another season where Inter, we went into it, I think, with a lot of hope and expectation around this team because of the manager that they appointed, because of the signings that they made, breaking the club transfer record twice, and they may well end up trophyless, which for Conte, but for that brief spell he had at Atalanta, it would be the first time he's ever had a season without some kind of silverware to show for it. On Saturday night, I actually thought they played well. I think they deserved more. They deserved to go through. It was again one of those kind of frustrating evenings where Inter didn't score the goals that their kind of football merited, because I think there were a number of chances, be it with, I think the clearest one towards the end when Alexis Sanchez backheels it to Christian Eriksen and Ospina makes the save. Eriksen could maybe have put it more in the corner than sort of just off centre. But they kept creating, and I think what was quite interesting after 3 months without any football was how we began to see some sort of new solutions to how Inter build up their play. Eriksen looked more kind of included and more a part of what they are doing than he had been when he shortly after joining the club. So in that respect, it's encouraging. But some of the things I didn't like from that performance. I mean, I think Nima brought it up on Twitter on the night. Why, when you're not going to extra time, are you bringing on Stefano Sensi so late in that game, particularly when you've got 5 substitutions that you can make, and the first one he brings on Alexis. Fair enough. Alexis, I thought had a bit of an impact in the game. You then do your classic Conte thing, which is my wing backs run themselves into the ground, so I have to change them. And then sort of Ranocchia for De Vrij and Sensi for Eriksen. That kind of left me scratching my head a little bit. And I suppose it kind of fits into a bit of a pattern that, but for the 2 games against a mediocre Milan in the derby and the win away in Naples in the league, where they won there for the first time in 23 years, Inter do have this kind of braccino corto, the tennis player's kind of shrunken arm, which is quite the image that Italy gives us in terms of sporting idioms. But
it's a good phrase.
I think this has been a theme throughout the season where Inter have played really well in games where in the past they haven't. So, for example, an hour away at the Camp Nou against Barcelona, they were very good. Probably their best display ever there, I would say. Better than when they had Mourinho and Inter's trebles winners. And I know it's a different Barcelona side, but the way they kind of took the game to Barcelona and caused them problems, that was really encouraging. Same kind of first half hour versus Dortmund. And in both of those games, they end up losing the game. and they haven't really shown up in either of the Derby d'Italia against Juventus as well. So that is something that you might even say has been a bit of a step back, really, particularly the performances against Juventus, because Spalletti had a way.
Spalletti did so well against the good teams, didn't he? That was the thing when we got in the Champions League.
And I particularly remember how, again, Inter rarely won the games against Juventus or even got points against Juventus, but they performed well to the point that you left those games either with a sense of injustice or, oh, come on, really? So I think that is where I'm sort of critical of Conte this season. How much of it is down to him, given clearly the game plans he puts in place are the right ones, because they get the team into the position to be either in the lead or cause their opponents problems. Back in October and November, his complaint was, I'm playing the same guys every week. The squad doesn't have the depth that
it's provocative. Just listening to you say it just pisses me off. Like it doesn't. There's no reality. I mean, that quote that you're referring to. We only bought players for Sassuolo and Cagliari. Yeah, those two players happen to be your best ones, mate.
I'm really looking forward to when Tonali joins and he can basically say, we've only signed players from Sassuolo, Cagliari and Brescia. This is a disgrace. This is very much his new €10 in a €100 restaurant, I think, as he said at Juventus. So I mean, to circle back and say, has he improved the team? I think undoubtedly he's improved the team. I mean, Inter are not going to go to the final day wondering whether or not they're going to be in the Champions League. I mean, I know there's still 13 games to go and it's Inter and a lot can happen, but I would be very surprised if that were the case. I think it's more the kind of memories that they've given fans. I mean, I've been to a lot of Inter games this season, and there's been an atmosphere in the ground and a kind of this is it. We're onto something here that there perhaps hasn't been that conviction at games before. I mean, particularly how they came out second half against Milan in a derby in the second game. And just this general, I think that there has been generally a feeling that they've been moving in the right direction. I think it was just 3 rounds ago. I mean, it's 3 months ago, but 3 rounds ago that they were top of the table, which isn't all that long ago. I know we could point to the fact that, as with every year, there was a kind of sloppy kind of period through Christmas and into the new year where they drew too many games. And I think it's those kind of home draws, that they had, along with the 2 results in the Derby d'Italia, that are responsible for them looking, at least on paper, so much worse than Juventus, when in actual fact they're more or less the same as Juventus, I would say, in terms of the results. Because ultimately, if they beat Sampdoria at the weekend, that the 6 points between them and Juventus are those 2 defeats in the Derby d'Italia.
In what is it? Death, taxes, Christmas, and Inter's Christmas depression. Those are things that I'm for. Right. Right. I'm gonna hand you over to Mike. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, James. My question is on the away goals rule right now in regards to matchups that had a first leg with fans and now a second leg without fans. So I'm curious because it wasn't really a factor with Inter Napoli because Napoli had won that first leg on the road, so it wasn't really an advantage there. But say Milan, Juve, Coppa Italia, and perhaps Juve, Lyon in Champions League, whenever they figure out when they're going to play that match, Juve is going to be at a disadvantage for not playing with fans at home to get back into that matchup. So do you think away goals should be scrapped for these specific matches that one leg has fans and the next one does not?
Interesting. I think one of the kind of big talking points of getting this restart underway has been to try and keep as many things that were part of a normal orthodox season as possible to kind of maintain these elements of sporting integrity. I think that was one of the kind of key kind of flashpoints about the 5 substitutions rule, even though I think that's essential in a season where you're now going to be playing, in Inter's case, 13 games, with only 30 minutes between each of them. So I think no solution to this restart was going to be perfect, because we're working in kind of an imperfect environment right now. It depends. I do think there are some teams that do stand an advantage by in the current situation, where there are little or no fans or little or no presence within the stadium. I think Arrigo Sacchi made a quite kind of provocative point about this in Gazzetta a couple of weeks ago, where he says, like, I expect Sassuolo to do really well, because Sassuolo, they hardly have any crowds anyway, so it's fine.
Well, I mean,
this was the year for Chievo to be in Serie A, wasn't it? They could have made the Champions League.
So you don't see. I mean, you don't subscribe to what my colleague on the Serie A show, John Solano, calls him his favorite boomer, Zdenek Zeman, when he said that campionato falsato, etc. You don't subscribe to that?
Well, I mean, there's always something that leads people like Zeman to cry that the campionato falsato is
he's not there, is he? Like, he's completely lost the plot.
No.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the only reason why football is being played at all at the moment is because of money, and how so many clubs are so dependent on TV money, and otherwise I think they would have done what had happened in France, which now looks like a premature decision, which is just to cancel it and come back. So the thing is, I believe that come August, when the Champions League restarts, we will begin to see some fans, a small percentage of fans, be allowed into the stadium. I know that's something that has been called for by the president of the Italian Football Federation. I know it's something that UEFA want. How you then choose who those fans are and how and what criteria allows them to get access above other fans, I think is going to be is another debate. But in light of that, perhaps allowing the away goals rule to stand still makes sense, even though you're not getting a complete home advantage. Say in Juventus's case, you're not getting 38, 42,000, however big that stadium is. And it's a really loud stadium, sort of behind you and against Lyon. But then again, Juventus shouldn't really need a home crowd to beat Lyon. Not that their first leg was particularly encouraging in that regard, but there you go.
You mentioned, Mike mentioned that there was a possible idea to scrap the away goals rule. Andrea Agnelli had an even better idea. He said, why don't we just scrap the first legs? Because they were 3 years ago. We're going to play in 90-minute matches to the end of the tournament. Why don't we just start now? I'm sure that's a great idea. Man. I think can't see any potential hit from that whatsoever.
Sometimes it's better to just be quiet. It's like with the amount of nonsense that Agnelli's had. I saw that that clip he said about Atalanta, using them as an example. That was
a lie. Daniel's favorite moment of the year so far.
No, but first of all, that was in English, so there was no need for people to suggest that it was in Italian and it was lost in translation. The interview was in English, and I watched it. You just had to pay like €2, and you could watch the whole damn thing live stream again. And he said what he said in English, and he speaks absolutely fantastic English. So there's no lost in translation there. So no, It's Andrea Agnelli, he does what he does. What can you say? Right, James. Yeah, sorry.
I just had one quick question. We were talking about Europe. We heard reports today that the Europa League will be a series of sort of one-off matches from now on. I just wanted to ask James, Inter have been so bad in sort of one-off do-or-die matches. Does this actually make it less likely that you're going to be successful in the competition this year? Because I'm less confident in a 90-minute match against Getafe in sort of Gelsenkirchen, wherever it's going to be, than I would have been over 2 legs.
Yeah, I you know what? I mean, I go into every sort of European knockout stage, particularly in the Europa League, where inevitably an Inter or a Roma has dropped into it, and you look at them on paper and you think, yeah, they should be able to at least make a semi-final or get. And they never, with the exception of Napoli, who did it under Rafa Benitez, and Fiorentina under Montella, they never do. And it still baffles me about Inter, particularly in a sort of Inter's great history in that competition. I think it going to a one-game knockout stage. I mean, on the basis of Saturday night, I can see them, having 26 shots, 15 of which are on target, and Getafe nick it 1-0. I think
Getafe are like Napoli at the moment, aren't they? They'll just sit there and punch Inter in the face, and then a couple minutes at the end, they'll nick something with one of their 35-year-old forwards.
Followed by Antonio Conte's classic moan and rant afterward. That all they do is defend. I can't stand him. I'm sorry. This man drives me insane. And what and everything he says is so contradictory, and he's arrogant, and he also says stupid shit and stuff like that. The stuff he said about this notion of that if you play defensively, it's like cheating. That's the kind of nonsense you hear from Barcelona. That's what you expect that from the Meshkeun Club hypocrites, because that's kind of what they are.
I mean, would you guys have been pleased had Inter won the Coppa Italia? Would you have been using that to point to kind of progress under Conte, or would you be it's a poxy competition?
Yes,
no,
absolutely, yes.
I would not.
Yes.
I absolutely would not.
Oh. I would.
I really wouldn't. No. Sorry, Nima, but for me, the clear indicator of progress is how less panic there is to qualifying to the Champions League on the last match day.
Well, we've set the bar pretty low last season, so I think we should.
Exactly. That's it. So any comparison between last season and this season is completely invalid because of just the mess up that happened towards the end of the season, or to the middle and then towards the end of the season last year. So I think the Coppa Italia is it is what it is. Look, it's a nice pat on the shoulder, But I've said this before on this podcast,
Don't tell that to the.
You didn't get the gig for advertising the final.
Yeah, don't tell that to.
It's a nice pat on the back.
Don't say that to Gigi Buffon, because apparently
ultimately, the Europa League is so much more valuable, and I have this feeling that this is this season. Like I think Inter's problem is when Inter's problem when it comes to Europe has been how badly stretched and shallow the squad is. But if it's being played post everything, you don't have to worry about the Sampdoria game. You're playing on Thursday, but you don't have to worry about the Sampdoria game on the Sunday. You don't have to worry about the Sassuolo away game on the next. I think it's just going to be a different story. It's quarterfinals, semifinals, final, 4 matches.
I hear what you're saying, but Getafe is exactly the kind of name that would fit perfectly on the list of clubs that have knocked out Italian sides in the last 7 or 8 years.
Absolutely.
Ludogorets,
Agreed.
Copenhagen.
I mean, they are a poor man's Atletico Madrid under Simeone, aren't they? I mean, let's be honest.
They're a nasty team.
Hapoel Beersheva.
Oh,
I don't
that was the groups. Give us some. I was only thinking knockouts, otherwise it really does get depressing.
But I gotta say, for me,
there and the singular focus.
Dnipro, I think.
And desire.
to answer your question, James. For me, what I want to see is progress on every front. That's what I wanted to see going into this season with Conte. What I wanted to see was qualification from the Champions League, from the group stage of the Champions League. That he failed. I wanted to see a minimum final of the Coppa Italia. Okay, he got one step further from the quarterfinal last year to the semifinal. Slight improvement, but barely noticeable. Third position, that's what I expected Inter to finish this season. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. And when it comes to the Europa League, I wanted to see at least a semifinal final. That to me at least shows, even if he doesn't win a trophy, there's improvement. But I mean, that doesn't mean, that's just on the result side of it. But if it would be very unfair, and I'm not Antonio Conte's biggest fan, But it would be very unfair not to acknowledge the fact that he has brought in a lot of positive things at Inter. He's brought an identity to this team. They have an idea. They have an ideology. It's not crosses and inshallah like it was on the 3 years with Spalletti and everyone else. Just knock it into the corner and pray to God that Icardi gets on the end of it and scores. It's not that. They have an identity. They have an idea of how they want to play. They have scare me, as the Italians say. All of that is there, and that's all thanks to Antonio Conte. It's just that Antonio Conte has been given more money than any other Inter manager, even more than Mourinho was in 2010 and 2009. And this is what he has to show for it. It's Ashley Young, it's Victor Moses, it's Cristiano Biraghi to play next to those horrible players from Sassuolo and Cagliari, and it's never his fault. This is what drives me mad. There's no coherence. The man acts. I don't see any red thread in what he does and says and how he communicates, and that provokes me. It really does.
Yeah, I think Inter. It's been really interesting following him this season. I mean, I was in Singapore for their kind of poorly attended games at the International Champions Cup, which again was a real eye opener watching them play United, and there being like a tiny wedge of Inter fans in a Red Sea of United fans, and those Interisti had come all the way from Indonesia. Shout out to the Indonesian Inter club. But even then, he was saying, we're behind. Certainly in terms of getting the players out, that he no longer considered kind of conducive to the kind of spirit that he wanted in the team, and the mentality that and the standards that he wanted the team to set. And there was the front page of Gazzetta, was it today, which was scontento, which was like unhappy, which is like, when is he ever contento?
He is incontentabile. That's the word, isn't it? Like, that's the pun. But that's his weakness, and that's kind of his strength as well. But it is quite grating if he doesn't get results. But it's kind of it's not a surprise, is it? That's what he does, and I just sort of take it as it is. I understand why it's annoying, and I'm not. When I went on that rant earlier, I wasn't saying there wasn't problems. I was absolutely baffled by that Sensi thing as well in the 87th minute. By the way, when Ranocchia came on, I thought we were going to have a repeat of what happened with Bologna last year. I was actually quite relieved he stayed in defence.
No, that's the thing. If that was happening, something would have been broken in my house. That would have really set me off. That was like
the other thing I said,
90 million euros, and you put Ranocchia up top.
I did ask someone with about 10 minutes left who was also into fan. Can you remember a match this season where Conte's switched away from a back three? That's another thing that you can ask when Inter clearly need a goal, and you've got these three men at the back who are lovely and they pass the ball very nice and we all like them. But with 10 minutes left, you might as well put Esposito on us. Just do something. We don't need three defenders against a team that's too scared to overtake the halfway line.
The thing that gets me is, and this has been a recurring theme of the last couple of years, really, is that when assessing Inter managers, and I'm talking about Spalletti and Conte, these are two coaches who in the last few jobs or built reputations over the course of their careers, that they're really kind of creative, inventive managers, right? They make us rethink or reimagine how existing players who've been on the team, how they play. They tend to reinvent them. And that was something, but for Brozovic, that Spalletti really struggled with. And you mentioned it earlier, Nima, how kind of predictable Inter's play was, which isn't something you can ever really say about any of Spalletti's other teams. No. And Conte is sort of finding the same problem. It's a different system, and yet the reason why, certainly going into Saturday night's game and the excitement around Eriksen's performance and what Eriksen might be able to bring is like, Inter had become too predictable, and I don't know what it is about Inter that kind of stumps these managers.
It's the fact that they are mad. They're both insane. Both Spalletti, in his way, is insane.
Did you see Spalletti's Instagram photo the other day with all those shirts hanging in midair on some kind of bizarre kind of climbing frame in his garden?
One of the
Absolutely
attached to a
extraordinary.
tree, like some weird Christmas. Like, I mean,
the Wicker Man of
Yes.
of football shirts. Yeah.
you're trying to tell me that they're not all there.
That's
I mean,
what
there's
Inter
a fine
does to you.
line. There's a fine line between madness and genius. But when they're at Inter, they cross that line, and it's clear, that's what. So I think with him, I would like the next Inter coach to be sane. That's all I want. That's pretty much where I draw the line. And I want the winner's mentality, but I also want someone who understands how this club works. And it's not to out crazy Inter. You need to calm the situation down and be like Mourinho did, like even Mancini did. And that's why I think Simeone is perfect for Inter. He's pragmatic, but he knows how the club works. Inside out, and he understands the club. Conte comes from Juve. That's a completely different culture. It's everyone just does as they're told at Juve. The Soldatini, the famous Soldatini comment by Cassano. But at Inter, it's not like that. You need to have all these different, groupings with you to pull this thing together. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And with Spalletti, clearly it didn't work. We had basically some weird version of Love Island go on for 6 months in front of everyone with Mauro and Wanda and Raja and Ivan, and they're not talking with that one, and that one unfollows that one on Instagram. And I mean, come on. I just want to say that's a year ago, okay?
I was going to say I'll take some bad matches behind closed doors instead of 2 months of Icardi has opened up to Napoli. Oh no, he hasn't. Now he's been offered to Roma. Oh no, he's actually said no. Oh no, Wanda's gone on TV again and said this.
And then Wanda on Tiki Taka arguing with Cassano back and forth, and then Cassano somehow turning out to be the voice of reason, which just tells you everything you want to know about how mad that insane situation was.
The other thing that again has been a kind of question mark over this season for me is I remember being sat in Inter's hotel in Singapore and Rajana Inglan when he got off the bus from training. He was the most celebrated player that all the locals came out to see. Or in the case of sort of the Indonesia fan club had basically booked their tickets to come and to get an autograph with, and Raja was clearly there, to be a part of that team. Wanted to at least kind of force the conversation that he had his head screwed on. He wanted to make good on what had been a really disappointing kind of first season, but for that sort of last 2 or 3 months and the goal against Empoli, and yet he was kind of lumped in with Icardi and all the disruption that had caused. And now we're getting to June and it seems that Raja will be back.
Naughty children need to be put on a timeout, and I think Marotta just put him on a season-long timeout, didn't he? Yeah, that's what that was. I mean, at the height of that madness, he does an interview with a Belgian newspaper where he actually says this. I'm paraphrasing, but this is the gist of what he says: that he's worked out a schedule together with the club, with the club of when he can go to the club on the weekends. I mean, for goodness sakes, this has to have ramifications, and I'm glad it did. But I do think that it seems that he's kind of learned his lesson, and in the way that the rest of the team, especially on social media, they all seem to love each other, and they seem to get along. I say bring him back instead of spending money on Arturo Vidal, because other than that, what's Antonio Conte going to whinge about next season when he draws against Sassuolo? Oh, don't get me started. This man drives me mad. No, but seriously, I do think Inter should give him a second chance, and it seems that Marotta is on that page as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, and for a team that started the season getting a lot of goals from midfield, and then for that to dry up, kind of when Sensi got hurt. I think Raja does bring that, and in the kind of economic environment in which Inter operating in the moment, it kind of makes sense to review some of the players who are out on loan, or we can all see it. They'll find a player that they really like, let's say Sandro Tonali, and basically package Sebastiano Esposito up in the deal for 2 cents. and then watch Esposito become the biggest thing in Italian football. We'll have to see.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. This Esposito and Pinamonti thing. It's got Mattia Destra written all over it. If you ask me, I'm sorry. I don't. It's send them away. It's especially now when Pinamonti's got Raiola as his agent. I'm like, I don't want to do business with that man. Like, it's just, and as long as he had Ibra, I'd do business with him. But other than that, no. It's like that. It's a toxic environment, and you never know what's going to happen. If he's unhappy, he'll just go on a massive tirade somewhere and destabilize. And you can do that at Juve because Juve are a stable club. Inter are not a stable club. Things like that have that stuff like that becomes like a giant earthquake at Inter, and it's just. No, I don't know. My hope is Sandro Tonali without a doubt, because I think with that midfield, I mean, he wants to keep Gagliardini because he wants to fix Gagliardini. That's fair enough. That's his decision. I respect that. But other than that, if he wants to cash in on Vecino to bring in Tonali and then reintegrate Nainggolan, I can't think of an Inter fan that wouldn't sign on to that, to be honest.
Really can't. It does feel like the midfield is, for once, not the most urgent place.
No, we've got 20 central midfielders of class, but we still got Victor Moses and Antonio Conte.
Yeah, I was going to say, the problem is the wings, as it has been for the last 60 years. So.
Exactly. I don't know why particularly right back, since Maicon is just like such a blind spot. It's I mean, you can say both sides, but like every year, I mean. Who's the guy that they signed from Besiktas and then sent back?
Chano Erkin.
Oh my God!
Inter legend Chano Erkin.
Oh my God! Il Divino Jonathan.
And Saldi went well.
Dodo Pires. Dodo is the fake one.
Mark Montoya again. Yeah. I mean, they tended to sign these players like. Sort of early on in the summer transfer window. It's like, look, Inter doing their business early. What a professional club. Brilliant. And then those guys were like sold or loaned out by the end of the transfer window. It's just
Erkin was that Suning. So that was the best moment of that Suning arrival summer, I think.
But I mean, that was did you read his interview in Turkish media where he completely threw Frank de Boer under the bus because
really? I thought he did a great job at Inter.
Yeah, no, he was like that man. I mean, he basically said I was Mancini's guy. Everything was going well, and then that man came in. I think that's a direct quote. That man came in, which is absolutely brilliant. Right, thank you so much, James. We're just gonna do this. You stayed for the whole hour. Thank you so much. Have you got something you want to plug that we can promote that's coming out?
Well, there is something coming out, and it'll be very fond to all Interisti, because he was your nemesis for so long. But I had a long chat with Andriy Shevchenko last Friday, which I'm currently sort of transcribing, which will be out, I think, in the weekend. So look out for that. We don't actually talk much about. I don't think we actually talk at all about Inter, apart from the Dynamo Kiev game, where in 2010. Yes. Which, if you've forgotten about or you're a lapsed Interista, you read the Mourinho interview, because a lot of people say that was the real turning point in that season. And Shevo was like, they were dead. They were dead. Finished. He blamed the goalkeeper. It's brilliant.
Yes. Oh, I'm so reading that. I am so reading that. Right. Thank you so much, James. And it's at James Horncastle if they want to follow you on Twitter, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, that's the one.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your chat and speak soon.
Speak soon. Ciao, James. Right. That was. It's always great to have James on, isn't it? I always write him and say 15-20 minutes, but it's never 15-20 minutes.
I think he knows that by now.
Yeah, I think he knows that. It's like his 8th time that he's on for like 40 minutes.
Oh.
Right. No. So I just wanted to briefly, before we move on, touch on. I just wanted to touch on the Napoli game. What pissed me off, what really set me off was not Inter did play well. Well, you're absolutely right. And I have to say, I want to go on the record and say that people who think that Inter should sack Antonio Conte now need their heads examined. I mean, that there's no logic to that at all. I was against him coming in the first place, but now that he's here, you have to give him time. You have to give him the 2-3 seasons. It doesn't make any sense if you're not going to do that That's madness. To me, that's insane. So I'm not saying that we should sack Antonio Conte. I'm just critical that the backup he's received and the results don't so far, as the Italians say, I conti si fanno alla fine. And we're not there yet. We're not at the end yet. So I just want to say but so far if this is, I'm not impressed. I don't think the performances and the results match the investment and the protection that he's get. Because remember, Beppe Marotta is, what he's done for this man and all the protection and all the things that he does for him to succeed, the environment he's created. I can't think of it's Facchetti, Mancini under Facchetti was the last person to have that kind of a figure protect and create such a great environment for him. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm wrong and Conte turns out, that Mo is right and we win the Europa League or at least make the final. I want to see improvement. I want to see improvement that matches all of this, all this investment and all this rebuild from scratch. That's all I wanted to say about that when it comes to Conte. But when it comes to the game, I was disappointed. I was really disappointed in the second half for the fact that Inter looks so incredibly devoid of ideas and easily read. Mo, what about you?
Yeah. Look, the second half was frustrating for sure. For a portion of the second half, I think when he finally did the switches, especially when Alexis came on, as James had just said, we had our best chance. I wasn't disappointed. Honestly, it's very bizarre. It's a very bizarre. It's very set of circumstances. I don't know. I don't know if I'm just an apologist for circumstance or I just try to rationalize everything away as a personality type. But I think, first of all, if we're talking about milestones, I think leaving the San Paolo 1-1 and feeling defeated and deflated is in fact an achievement in and of itself and tells of where the two different clubs have come and gone in such a short span of time. And I can never really complain about games where, save for maybe 15-20 minutes throughout the entire match, the run of play went your way and it was just a miracle save after miracle save, or rusty header by Lukaku or whatever. But these guys have been away for 3 months, so I'm not reading too much into this. I don't think there was enough desire. I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to desire, and I think the desire has always been in proving to be a contender for the Scudetto. I don't think it's been in anyone's heart, really, in their heart of hearts, and Conte's ambitions to win the Coppa Italia. And which is why I still think that we have a good chance with the Europa League, because I think there'll be nothing but that to look at. So that's why I might be disappointed about certain things in the games, especially the late substitutions. I agree. But again, who is he going to bring on? Who's he going to bring on? You replace Lautaro and Lautaro or Lukaku. Who do you replace him with? It's going to be Alexis.
You take Lautaro off because Lautaro looks completely destabilized, and he's clearly rattled.
Yeah.
So bring on Alexis Sanchez. That's what I'm saying.
I know, but Nima, we don't know. We're not Conte. We're not with these players. We don't know what state of mind the player is in. Maybe he's trying to, make sure that Lautaro is part of the long-term project next year. Maybe if he had taken him off, subbed him off halftime or in the 60th minute, he was afraid that he'd be really destabilizing the players' mentality. I don't know. There's more to managing a squad than we know from whatever 90-minute window we get to look at every other day or so, So I don't know. I like to put my faith in whoever is, as long as they're proving.
Come on, say it. In Conte we trust. That's how I'm going to force you to say it.
In Conte I trust for sure, and it's not Conte. It's Spalletti I trusted, and whoever, okay. Save for Mazzari or De Boer or whatever. But
I was just being. Why I wanted you to force you to say it. Say that dirty word.
But I think that, like you said, I think that the improvements to the team overall have been so tremendous and so structural. Like the mentality, the identity, the coherence of play. And I think all of that matters so much more than Coppa Italia exit at the San Paolo after 3 months worth of quarantine, playing in front of no fans with very little to motivate you in June. You know, that for me just doesn't rub me the wrong way too much. You know.
That's fair.
Right.
That's fair.
That's
Mike,
said.
Mike, talk to me. Where are you on this?
I'm listening and I'm enjoying. First of all, I love when Will and James are on the podcast together because it just brings me a whole new level of excitement. You know, when they talk to each other, it's like
it's fun.
You could put them on a theater, and I'd sit by myself in the chair.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I agree. It's very, very good thing.
There's nothing that once I found out James and Will were going to be on, I'm like, I'm there.
I think that meant you thought I won't get a chance to speak for 45 minutes. That was my bad.
Look, I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered right now that Inter's gone out in Coppa Italia. I mean, maybe it's because the last 3 months I've just been empty and not had that one match, 2 match a week of part of my life still there, and then it comes back and it's just like, okay, well, I know this feeling because I've experienced it the last 3 months of just not having them involved. So I'm not that bothered by it. Like, yeah, of course I'm bothered, but at the same time, it's just like there's more important things. There was progress. I said Ospina made some miraculous saves in that game that were Inter could have easily won the game and gone from there. So I'm not that bothered. If they would have come out and played like crap the entire game, then I'd be a little more bothered. But look, it's the first match back. And there might not be that much more to play for the rest of the season. Having such a gap now from first to Inter in the Scudetto race, and there's not that much there. But like Mo was talking about earlier, hey, listen, we've got Europa League, and this could be our opportunity to finally care about it and finally move forward with it because we're not struggling just to make Champions League this year. So I'm not that bothered given our stance in Europa League, and look, once we get a better feel of what our return is like when we play Samp on the weekend, then you can ask me how I feel if we don't get a result then, and I'll give you my a higher sense of how pissed off I would be.
Brilliant. Right. Will, I'll leave the last word of the. I'll leave the last word of the pod. Not the pod. I'll leave the last word of the Napoli game to you. Anything else you want to raise?
No, I thought it was actually a better performance overall than I was expecting. The first half was very impressive, but predictably, as we've seen before in previous games, in fact, I sent a message to. I mentioned that I messaged a friend. I also messaged him at the end of the first half saying, I think we're going to pay for the fact that we haven't added a second. And at the exact moment I looked up and Candreva was smashing the ball into Ospina's gloves at the near post. And then 30 seconds later, it became 1-1. And it's a film we've seen before. I didn't think the second half was very good up until the last 25 minutes. I think it's just, I think the problem is that we are a very good team when we are dominating the other team physically. But when our energy levels drop, we try to do the same thing as we were doing in the first half and we haven't got the energy to do it. So we're a very good team when we're intense, and we're not such a fun team when we're lacking energy. So that
we're unwatchable when we lack energy. We're painful to watch.
Well, I mean, it was a strange match. We wasn't unwatchable. Come on.
The second half was in large stretch.
The second half wasn't good, but and it was frustrating that he waited so long to introduce some changes. That I think is indiscutable. I was going to say indiscutable. It's not. You can't discuss that. You can't debate that. but it wasn't really anything that we hadn't seen before. So I kind of just resigned myself to it. I think the overall, there was very fine margins in both of those semi-finals. Quite how it's a Juventus-Napoli final, I'm not really sure. Napoli have got some kind of esoteric force pushing them in this Coppa Italia, because I remember the quarter-final against Lazio, and I think Lazio hit the bar about 6 times in that match in the last sort of 20 minutes or so. But, it's cup football, that happens. I wasn't too disappointed with the performance, but that was precisely why I was frustrated that we went out, because it was doable. But I think if I'm going to look and have regrets about this match, obviously I have it on the goal that was conceded, because that was very silly. But I have them on the first leg. I think that's really the problem. It was the tie was lost in a first leg that happened 4 months ago, when we had a lot of games one after the other, and we weren't at our best. So
fair enough. Right, let's move on. I mean, we play Sampdoria on the weekend. It's impossible to preview anything about that, because it's a game that remember that beautiful memory when they allowed half the games to be played and then they didn't let the other half be played and all that. So this is our makeup game against Sampdoria at the San Siro at an empty.
Our makeup game.
No, I mean we're making up the game. I mean, it's like a game in hand. But you remember that not snogging. I'm not saying they're gonna.
No, I was thinking sort of mascara and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. Like makeup. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No. I mean,
this match is. This match is like this became some kind of mythical creation that a couple of months ago. It was the game that didn't exist. For it was going to be in February, and then it wasn't. Then it was postponed, and then it was scheduled for. Oh no, this was the game that had no spot in the calendar because the games had been called off.
No, because Andrea didn't want to play that game.
The FIGC were chancing on us going out of Europe, so there was no place to put in December. I remember Fabrizio Biasin, who we quote a lot on SempreInter, who said, I think Inter Samp is going to open the Max Pezzali concert on the 11th of July. That's where they'll end up putting it, because there's nowhere else to fit it. It's quite an exciting event, because this is a match that I think a lot of us had resigned ourselves to never seeing for as long as we lived, and it's only a few days away. So
don't jinx
better deliver.
Don't jinx it. It can still not happen. So. We don't know in these days. Nowadays, you take it one day at a time. That's my motto. Plan for the future, but take it one day at a time. Right. So I don't know what to say about it other than we'll just have to wait and see. And I'm hoping to that we can see some sort of the Inter pick themselves up from this.
I would just say that the only thing I think you can really say realistically and meaningfully about this game is that the next 8 matches are Inter Sampdoria, Inter Sassuolo, Parma Inter, Inter Brescia, Inter Bologna, Verona Inter, Inter Torino, Spal Inter, right? So we are potentially -6 points away from Juventus and Lazio if we win this match, right? So there is still a chance. So we've just got to do our bit, and so it's important to start well. There's a lot of points to be won in this next sort of 8 games that could potentially reopen the door. I'm not particularly optimistic myself. We are clearly the 3rd favourites in this race, but I think there is still a race to be run if we start reasonably well. So let's not resign ourselves to a nothing end to the season just yet.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. That's fair. So let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the negativity. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Michael Gallo.
This week's Moggi of the week. Well, it could be a frog too, but I'm gonna shift it to the part where the security in the Mallorca stadium had a colossal failure. They played a closed door game, like the rest of soccer matches are in the world right now. But apparently it wasn't closed doors, because a pitch invader, got onto the field somehow wearing an Argentina shirt. So I'm trying to find out, kind of wrap my head around how a pitch invader ends up on the field if there's no fans in the stadium.
That's a special level of incompetence. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, this guy wearing the Argentina jersey, he jumped over a fence. He said in an interview afterwards, he jumped over a fence. That's all it took for him to get into the stadium, where we've got the biggest club in the world playing. And there was no security since there's no fans of these games. They've probably lightened security up 80-90%. And if this fan got on the field and he went up to Messi, but he didn't get a picture with Messi, but he got one with Jordi Alba. And now the Spanish police are saying that he's going to be charged criminally because it was a health risk towards he socially distanced himself with he didn't apply that rule with the people that he was going after. So he's going to be charged criminally, not just a fine, even though he deems that he's only going to get a fine, but doesn't look that way according to Spanish police. So that's my Moggi of the week is the Mallorca Stadium defense, as I would call them.
The security.
That does remind me that there was that Mallorca against Barcelona match was going on at the same time as Napoli Inter on Saturday evening, which gave somebody the opportunity to say on Twitter that Lautaro had more touches in the Mallorca Barcelona match than he had in Napoli Inter. Such was his state of mind at the San Paolo.
Sure. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Will Beckman.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Yes, I couldn't find anything particularly that excited me this week. So I've actually done a frog sort of encompassing the last 3 months of COVID era planet Earth. I saw a story on Sky News about 3 weeks ago, and I'm simply going to read it because I think that there are some jokes and some stories that really just tell themselves. So I'm just gonna plow on with this. This is from the 28th of May. 2 men snuck into a bedroom with machetes after being hired to carry out a stranger's sexual fantasy of being tied up in his underwear and stroked with a broom, only to discover they'd got the wrong address. The pair from Sydney, Australia, made their apologies and left the victim's bedside as soon as they realised their mistake. The judge in this particular case, they were acquitted of intending to intimidate while being armed with an offensive weapon. But the judge in New South Wales said they carried the machetes either as a prop or as something to use in that fantasy. The fantasy was unscripted and there was discretion as to how it would be carried out. According to court documents, a man living in New South Wales wanted a broom handle to be rubbed around his underwear. He was willing to pay $5,000 if it was really good. But the client made arrangements with a man on Facebook and sent his address before he later updated it after moving house more than 30 miles away, hence the misunderstanding. So a really unfortunate sexual fantasy gone wrong for this poor man who I believe was meant to be called Kevin, but wasn't called Kevin. So he got a bit of a surprise at 6:15 a.m. when 2 men turned up offering to take machetes into strange places. So I think that has to give. That was an interesting story that I think is just important that we share it with our listeners. I should just clarify, the 2 men and their driver did eventually arrive at the correct address, where the customer spotted one had a great big knife in his trousers.
I love how you brought that to a happy ending. Right. God. Jesus. Oh, dear.
No more to add.
No, there is nothing more to add to that. Let's move on to something much more sane and positive. This week's Moratti, which is presented by Mr. Mohammed Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
It's very good to be back. It's extremely good to be back. It's good to be back with football. It's good to be back on this podcast. And no matter what James Horncastle says, we're back because of money. I don't care why we're back, but we're back. And the fact that we're back is this week's Moratti of the week. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking more about football and watching matches, and talking about Inter. And even if it, gets us to pull what little hair, at least in my case, we've got left. So I think the Moratti of the week is the fact that football's back and we're back. And if there's anything the last 3 weird months has, made me learn and appreciate, of course, is, assuming everyone, of course, is healthy and safe and sound, is that we need to take everything, take nothing for granted. And I think football and things like this podcast is something that's very important for me, at least, fun-wise, and sanity-wise, and so it's very nice to be back. So great being with you guys.
Couldn't said it better myself. I agree 100%. I've totally missed doing this, and I've missed the games, and I've missed Inter in a way, I guess, in a sadomasochistic way. I've missed Inter destroying my mood for the rest of the week by emotionally giving me. And I mean, the thing is, the following day was when the Swedish league, opening day of the Swedish league, and IFK Gothenburg, my other twin child, decided to hit the other bollock from really hard with their baby shoes. So basically, the Inter and IFK kind of ruined the weekend for me. So, but at the end of the day, football is back, and that is in and of itself good. As much as any parent will say, I mean, you love your kids even though they drive you crazy. And you don't take them for granted, and you shouldn't take anything for granted. So, having said that, I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, James Horncastle, again, and you, Mike. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we get a nice 3 points this weekend. And I'll say that the last 3 months I've realized that I've been much more calm. My life has been calmer. And that's due to the fact that there's been, obviously Inter has been playing, so I'm not going crazy. But at the same time, sports in general are not on. So usually that's what makes me emotional and go crazy. So the fact that there has been no sports was a good thing, blessing in disguise. But now we're back to, okay, well, now I'm going to start ripping my hair out the rest of until July. So maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing, who knows? But it is a good thing that soccer is back, and excited for the game this weekend.
For sure. And you, Will, good to have you back again. Missed talking to you. Missed these back and forth.
I've just been talking to myself for the last 3 months. It's not quite the same when I don't have you on the other end.
Mo, Nassar, as always, a pleasure. Good to have you again, and I can't wait to start reading your previews. And boy, are you gonna be stressed? Mo? Oh, I think we lost Mo.
Yeah.
Oh, you there? Mo, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you're breaking up.
I'm here. I can hear you. I don't know. It was fine. It was fine all podcast long, and now just
okay. So do you want to just react to that last part that I said?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's really good to be back.
Good to have you back. And until next week, I am your host, Nima Tavale, wishing you all a good weekend. Health, safety of your loved ones and yourselves. 3 points, and sempre e solo Forza Inter. Forza Inter. Forza Inter. Forza Inter.